This video is about what's known as bit depth, which is a setting that is attached to every image you open in Photoshop. If you open an image and you go to the image menu and you choose mode, here you will find what bit depth your image is in. 8 bits per channel is the most common. If you ever open a JPEG file, every JPEG you've ever opened is an 8-bit file. What 8 bits means is between the brightest area you have in your photo, which might be white, and the darkest area, which would be black, you have a total of 256 brightness levels, and no more if you're in 8-bit mode. 256 is enough to make your images look really nice, and print looking pretty darn nice. But it's not enough if you want to do huge adjustments to your image. If the color of your image is way off, or your image looks almost black and you want to pull out the detail to make it look normal instead, 8 bits is just not much to do adjustments with. If your image already looks great, then 8 bits can be enough. 16 bits means you have thousands upon thousands of brightness levels within your picture, and therefore you can get away with more extreme adjustments in Photoshop when you have that kind of a file. But it's rare that you're going to see the difference. There are some instances. Let me show you the difference. In this case, the middle image is what I started with. And you see that it looks almost black where this middle area is? I wanted to brighten that to make it look more or less normal. And if I were to do that with an 8-bit image, that's what I have on the left, when I zoom in, the image looks like what's known as posterized. Oops, didn't mean to move it. But the image is posterized. That means I can see where one brightness level transitions to the next. There's not a smooth transition between the two. There's an abrupt one. That's posterization. If, on the other hand, I look at the image on the far right, I did it in 16-bit mode there. And there I don't see those abrupt transitions between one brightness level and another. There isn't what's known as posterization. To show you another example, here is a panorama that I stitched. And I stitched it once in 8-bit mode and a second time in 16-bit mode. And just here, you're not going to be able to notice it so much, but if you make an adjustment to it afterwards, what I'm going to do in my layers panel, I'm going to do a curves adjustment, and I'm just going to brighten up the dark portion of my image. It doesn't matter how I'm doing the adjustment, it just matters that I'm pulling out the detail. When I do that, if I show you what happened with an 8-bit result, this is what I would get. Do you see the banding where you can see a distinct transition from one brightness level to the next? And you can almost draw with a pen exactly where that transition is happening. That's posterization. It means we just don't have enough brightness levels in there to be able to get away with this kind of an adjustment. I'll turn off the 8-bit result and go with a 16-bit result. And you'll notice in 16-bit mode, it still looks smooth because we have thousands upon thousands of brightness levels in there. So even after applying that extreme adjustment, it can still produce a smooth looking end result. You'll also notice this when you're retouching an image and you're working with a sky. If you ever use something like the spot healing brush and you try to paint to get rid of something in a sky, and when you're done, you can see exactly where you painted. You can see the edges. You're probably in 8-bit mode. And if you were to switch to 16-bit mode by simply going to the mode menu or image menu, choose mode and go to 16-bit, and you do the same retouching over again, it'll look smoother and it won't have those artifacts. When you're done doing the retouching, you can even set it back to 8-bit and it'll usually still look smooth. It just needs that additional, it needs to be able to use those additional brightness levels in order to perform the smooth retouching on a sky. So that's another time when you might want to go to 16-bit. 32-bit is special. It's rarely used, but it's mainly used when you merge more than one exposure together into what's known as an HDR or high dynamic range image. And that can be done in Bridge. If you select multiple images in Bridge, there's a choice that's known as Merge to HDR. It would produce a 32-bit image, which has even more brightness levels than a 16-bit. Now what you're going to find is if you're in 16 or 32-bit mode, that certain filters in the filter menu are grayed out. They're simply not available. Make sure I'm on a layer that it could be used with. Okay. filter, you'll find that some of these simply don't work when you're working with a 16-bit image, like lighting effects. If I were to take that same image and change the mode to 8-bit though, then if I go back to filter and I try to use something like, where is it? Lighting effects, it is available. So if there's ever a filter that simply doesn't work, it's grayed out, see what mode your picture's in. And if you're in 32-bit mode or 16-bit mode, you might need to convert down to 8-bit to make it work okay. So most of the time for most people, I find that 8-bit mode, as long as the image looks close to right to begin with, it's not overly dark, overly bright, or way off in color, you're fine in 8-bit. But if you're going to stitch a panorama, or you're going to make radical changes to your images, or do retouching on a really smooth looking sky, 16-bit mode might produce a better looking end result. When you're completely done, you can always flatten your image to combine those layers together, and then to make the image smaller, you can choose Image Mode 8-bit. Then all the features in Photoshop are available, and you're fine.